Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Jennifer, and I am a supervising attorney at Legal Aid of North Carolina's Helpline. Today, we have Kara joining us, who will be presenting our SNAP 101 Listen and Learn presentation, and she's an attorney at one of our local offices. If you're unfamiliar with the format of this event, first, Kara is going to review a PowerPoint presentation, and at the end of that presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, you can just put them into the Q&A box on Zoom or the comment section on Facebook. We're not going to be answering those questions as they come in. Instead, we'll be reviewing and answering those questions at the end of the session. Please remember that this is a public forum and legal aid is not representing you at this time. You do not have an attorney-client relationship with us. Be sure not to reveal personal details about yourself and keep the questions as general as possible. We cannot provide you with specific legal advice about your situation. The session will end when there are no more questions, and regardless, this session will end at 4:30. We have a hard stop. With all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Kara to get us started.
Thanks, Jennifer, and good afternoon. Like Jennifer mentioned, my name is Kara Neaton. I use she, her pronouns, and I work on the Triad Public Benefits team. So we present these listen and learns on SNAP, and we also have one on Social Security. If you are interested in that, and tune in, you can find the next upcoming presentations online. So today I'm going to go over just generally what is SNAP, who is eligible. I'm going over the high level rules for how to qualify for the program. Wrapped up in eligibility, there are some changes that are going into effect. Some already went in effect at the end of last year, and some are going into effect on February 1st of this year. So we'll be covering some of those changes in this presentation. And then also talking about how to apply for benefits and maximize the benefit amount, how to recertify if you do receive SNAP, and then also what are some of the rights that you have relating to SNAP. So just to ground us before getting started, SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It is also known as Food and Nutrition Services, FNS, or it was formerly known as food stamps. And a lot of people sometimes still use that phrasing to refer to what this benefit is. It's a program that provides low-income households with money each month to help them purchase food. The money each month is placed on a reusable EBT card. It functions similar to a debit card, and it can only be used to purchase eligible food. So each month, a household that receives SNAP benefits would get a deposit loaded onto the EBT card, and they can use it throughout the month to purchase food for the household. The basics of eligibility are the following four things. You must be a US citizen or have an eligible immigration status. To qualify for SNAP in North Carolina, you'll need to be a North Carolina resident. You need to meet the income rules and then also meet the work requirements or an exemption. HR 1 is the bill that was passed by the federal government last year that changed some of these rules governing eligibility. And so, like I mentioned, we'll cover some of those changes as we move through these requirements. The two big changes relate to which immigration statuses are eligible for SNAP, and then also tie into the work requirements, or really more how the exemptions are set out. So effective in North Carolina on February 1st of this year, the list of eligible immigration statuses is going to be significantly smaller. This is one of the changes that we saw enacted by HR 1. So as of February 1st, US citizens, lawful permanent residents, Cuban and Haitian entrants, and COFA migrants are the eligible statuses to meet this requirement. It's important to note that lawful permanent residents, sometimes known as green card holders, generally have a 5-year waiting period before they can receive benefits. So it's 5 years after they lawfully entered the US. There are some exemptions to that. I think if that rule is specific to you, it's worth looking into, and if possible, consulting a lawyer or someone who can help you understand the rules there. As you can see in this big red box on the other side of the screen, these are some of the statuses that are no longer independently eligible. So it removes from eligibility refugees, asylees, certain Ukrainian nationals who were given parole during 2022 to 2024, individuals with deportation or removal withheld, and various other types of people that have come to our country. It's important to note that not everyone in the household has to have an eligible immigration status. So a household with mixed immigration status can still apply for SNAP benefits if they have household members who are one of these 4 eligible statuses. And it just simply would not include the non-eligible household members in the calculation of the benefit amount. The next piece of eligibility is meeting the income rules. So SNAP has a term they call categorically eligible, and many households meet this definition. It means that they have an income that is below 200% of the federal poverty limit, and that they have no disqualified household members. We'll get into some of the things that could disqualify a person in some of the next slides. So as you can see in the table, based on the household size, the 200% FPL, or federal poverty limit, income is gradually going up. So for example, a household of 2, the income limit to be categorically eligible is $3,408. We'll also get into how the benefit is calculated a little bit later on, but this is just to kind of get in the door and first establish kind of the preliminary eligibility. If your household is categorically eligible, then there's no asset limit applied to the eligibility test. I mentioned before that being categorically eligible requires not having a disqualified household member. Some of the ways people can be disqualified from SNAP benefits include certain types of felony convictions. So This is long. I tried to underline the important parts, bear with me, but individuals who committed and were convicted under federal or state law on or after August 23rd, 1996, of any offense classified as a felony by the law of the jurisdiction involved with an element of possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance. Those individuals are permanently disqualified from SNAP. There is an exception to that. If it was a Class H or Class I felony, it's possible to reestablish eligibility. There's a minimum 6-month disqualification period after the person is released from custody. And then they also would be referred to a mental health authority for an assessment. In addition to this felony controlled substance way to be disqualified, people can also be disqualified from SNAP benefits for what's called an intentional program violation. And we'll talk a little bit more about those, sometimes abbreviated IPV, later when we're talking about appeal rights and things of that nature. So we've talked about the citizenship or immigration, the income requirements. The fourth requirement is that you meet the work requirements or an exemption. This is a little bit complicated to wade through, and we'll try to distill it into some simple guidelines to keep track of. So the first thing to know is that there are sort of two requirements related to work requirements for SNAP. There's something called the registration requirement for work, and then there's the ABOD time limits. So this slide, we're talking about the registration piece. And it's helpful or important to know that HR 1, the federal bill passed last year, did not change the work registration requirements or exemptions. So generally, anyone age 16 through 59 would be required to be registered for work if they are a SNAP beneficiary, unless they meet an exemption. Work registration includes participation in the FNS Employment and Training Program. Workfare is not currently established in North Carolina, but is another way to meet work registration in other states. And then kind of the big thing is that you cannot voluntarily and without good cause quit a job of 30+ hours per week or reduce your hours to less than 30 per week if you have one and are registered for work under SNAP. The exemptions to this requirement include age. Like I said, it covers ages 16 to 59. So anyone outside of that range does not have to register. Certain parents and caretakers, and then kind of a broad category that covers physically and mentally unfit individuals for employment. And there are a lot of different ways to establish that someone is unfit for employment. It could be receiving disability benefits, having a doctor's note talking about a medical condition, or even something in the judgment of the DSS caseworker. Other people that can be exempt from the work registration is people who are participating in resident or non-resident drug or alcohol treatment programs, and students who are over 18 and enrolled at least half-time. Now, the second piece of the work requirements is the ABOD time limits. And I think this is where a lot of people typically are focused when we hear work requirements talked about. ABOD is an acronym that stands for able-bodied adult without dependents. And anyone who is considered an ABOD is considered a time-limited participant in SNAP. So that means they must complete 80 hours a month of work or participation in a work program or a combination of the two. And if they do not meet those work requirements or an exemption, then an ABOD can only receive SNAP benefits for 3 months in a 3-year or 36-month period. It's a fixed period. So the current one runs from January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2027. There's a lot to dig into on this slide, so we're going to spend a minute here. Completing 80 hours a month works out to about an average of 20 hours per week. Like I said, it can be a work program, or a combination of the two. And that can include employment for pay, or work in exchange for goods or services, volunteer work. It can really be a pretty broad requirement. The other thing is that there's a good cause exception. So if you would have completed your 80 hours for a month, but missed some of your work, and now when I'm using the word work, it encompasses that broad, expansive definition. That's a work program, volunteer work, etc. So if you would have completed your 80 hours for the month, but you missed some hours due to good cause, such as an illness, a household emergency, temporary unavailability of transportation, those types of things could be considered good cause, and you would essentially be considered to have met the work requirement if the absence from your work was temporary and you retain the work overall. So the general rule, which is that complete 80 hours a month. And if you do not, then you can only receive SNAP for 3 months in a 36-month period. That part remains unchanged. The changes from HR 1, we'll get into on the next slide, have to do with who is exempt from the time limit. So you either would complete the 80 hours or meet an exemption. And if you do neither of those things, you would have what's called a countable month. And that would be one of your 3 given months. If a person uses their 3 months and therefore becomes ineligible for ongoing SNAP benefits, they can regain their eligibility to participate in the program by essentially getting back on track. So doing the 80-hour requirement in a 30-day period, or if they newly meet an exemption, or at the end of the 36-month period. So for example, when we get to January 2028, people will become eligible again, even if they had become ineligible during this 3-year period. So the exemptions that are going to be effective February 1st are anyone who's under 18 or over 65, someone who lives in a household with a another household member who's under the age of 14, pregnant people, someone who's receiving disability benefits, if the person is medically certified as unfit for employment, so that's essentially like having a doctor's note or certification, or obviously unfit for work, which is again based on the observation or judgment of the DSS caseworker. And then a new category that got added by HR 1 is Indian, Urban Indian, or California Indian. A couple things that were changed or removed by HR 1 include changing the age limits. So it used to only go up to age 55, and now you can see it goes up to age 65. It also reduced the age of people living in a household with a young person. So here we're saying it's anyone living with someone under age 14. It was formerly 18 years old. HR 1 also removed a couple things from the exemption list, including people experiencing homelessness, former foster youth, and people who are veterans. So those are no longer independent ways to be exempt. But the North Carolina policy manual makes clear that obviously unfit for work, as judged by the DSS caseworker, can include things such as experiencing homelessness and other barriers to work. It could also include someone experiencing domestic violence, and is supposed to be interpreted rather broadly. So it's important to know if you are in this ABOD category, you need to report work activity to DSS. And you should also report to DSS if you believe that you meet one of those exemptions that I just covered. It is also important if you're meeting the requirement, the 80 hours per month, and something changes, not like a temporary thing where you might ask for good cause, but if you are no longer meeting the 80 hours per month, you need to report that to DSS by the 10th of the month following the month when the change occurred. So I think it's probably best to just think about getting something reported right away if you have a change in your work status, and if you are subject to these ABOD rules. Another important reminder is just not to assume that DSS already has correct or updated information in your file. This happens a lot with things like moving or even a change of phone number, and especially changes to work activity, the number of hours. It's important to try to keep all of that up to date or confirm that DSS has it. They're supposed to investigate or consider whether you meet any exemption, but it's probably best if you can also proactively offer that information if you think it helps you meet an exemption. For example, if you're pregnant or receiving Social Security disability, rather than assuming DSS knows that, sharing that information will help you establish the exemption. So now we'll talk a little bit about how to apply for SNAP. We went through the eligibility rules. And so if you think that you will qualify, this is how you can go about doing so. Applying is essentially a two-step process. So first you submit an application, which can be done in person at DSS, by fax, by mail, or online using North Carolina's ePass website. Every applicant has the right to file a SNAP application on the same day they visit DSS during office hours. After you do the application, a DSS caseworker will conduct an interview with you. Sometimes there might be an extra third step to your application process. If they need additional information after the interview, they may send a notice to you telling you what information they need and the deadline to provide it. So it's important to pay attention to any notices coming from DSS at the time of an application. And we have the website here if you wanted to learn more about how to apply. Kind of related to applying, we wanted to talk about maximizing benefits. So the SNAP monthly benefit amount is calculated by DSS using a formula set by the SNAP program overall. And the maximum benefit amounts you'll see in this table correspond to the household size, and they're updated each year on October 1st. So the maximum benefit for a household of one is $298. And then, you can see, for example, a household of four is $994. The actual amount you'll receive is based on household size, and then the collective household income and certain expenses. A household is people who live together and buy or cook food together. So roommates who live together but don't necessarily share any food could be considered separate households. Generally, a nuclear family that's living together would probably be considered the same household. Generally, having a higher monthly income, closer to that 200% income limit we talked about before, means your household would receive less benefits. But that said, sometimes having higher monthly expenses can mean or can translate into a higher monthly benefit for the household. So expense verifications are part of what will be covered in your application, the interview I mentioned, and sometimes also that third possible step where they need to request additional information. There are required verifications which are necessary to determine your eligibility. That includes things like verifying your identity, your citizenship or immigration status, etc. And recommended verifications, while optional, are usually in your best interest to provide because those are used to determine the benefit levels. So how much money per month out of that maximum amount your household would receive. So this can include things like your mortgage or rent expense, property taxes. Certain people who qualify as a specified person based on age or disability can deduct monthly medical expenses, and also childcare expenses are among the things that would be considered a recommended or optional verification. So SNAP is typically recertified every 6 months, and it will usually be notified to you. DSS should mail your household a form that is needs to be returned by essentially halfway through the month, by the 15th. And so if your current certification period was ending at the end of January, you would have gotten this form and needed to return it by January 15th, for example. And the reason for this is so that they can have enough time to process your application or recertification before the current period expires. And therefore you would have essentially seamless benefits by getting recertified to pick up right where the last period ends. It's considered a best practice to submit all of the required and recommended verifications when you turn in that recertification form. Apart from recertification, there are a few required changes that you are required to report, even if it's in the middle of a certification. So say you had been approved in the fall and we're in the middle of your 6-month period, there are certain things that you are still required to report to DSS before you get to the next recertification. Those things include the ABOD work report that I mentioned earlier. So if you are an ABOD and you are working or participating in a work program 80 hours a month and you stop and fall below that required level, you must report it mid-certification period. If anyone in the SNAP household receives lottery or gambling winnings of 4,250 or more, that's 4,250 or more, or if your household's income goes above 130% of the federal poverty level. That is the only required income reporting requirement. But it's helpful to know that you can report changes like expenses going up or income going down to DSS in the middle of a certification period, because it may end up increasing your SNAP benefits. So if your hours were cut at work, not so much that it drops below 80 hours a month, but your income is lower for the month and is going to stay that way, you can report that change to DSS and they could adjust the benefit calculation for the remaining months of your certification period. Finally, we've gotten to the last section. This is talking about appeals and what rights a person has during that process. So generally, if DSS is taking an action that impacts your SNAP benefits and you disagree with the decision, you most likely have the right to appeal. Typically, that will look like requesting a hearing. And there are two main types of hearings for SNAP. There's a state fair hearing process, which covers eligibility and benefit amounts, so like calculating the monthly amount. And then there's what's called an ADH, or administrative disqualification hearing. And that pertains to intentional program violations, or IPVs. Whenever you get a notice from DSS about your SNAP benefits or a SNAP application that was, for example, denied, it's important to read the notice carefully, because it should explain your appeal rights and also list the deadlines to appeal. So this state fair hearing is, like I said, relating to issues like eligibility or the calculation of your monthly benefit amount. To make an appeal, you have to contact DSS and request a fair hearing. This should be detailed, like I said, in the notice from DSS. You can make a statement in writing or orally. Typically, it would be a best practice to have some writing to confirm that you submitted it and on what date, but you can do it orally if that's what's available to you. Typically, the request for a fair hearing must be made within 90 calendar days of the date of the notice. In many cases, DSS will have to continue SNAP benefits at their existing level if you request an appeal right away. So usually that's within 10 days. Now that applies if you were receiving benefits and something is changing or terminating. If you have just applied for benefits, that will not be the case because technically there is no benefit yet to continue. The hearing will be conducted by a state hearing officer from the North Carolina State Department of Health and Human Services. The other type of hearing that comes up in SNAP is an administrative disqualification hearing. Like I said, this covers something like the intentional program violations. So this is used when DSS believes it has clear and convincing evidence that a person receiving, that a person has committed one or more acts of intentional program violation. And an intentional program violation means that a SNAP household member knowingly, willfully, and with deceitful intent commits a fraudulent act, such as making a false statement, hiding information, misusing their EBT card, which could include selling or trading their benefits on their EBT card, or using SNAP benefits to buy food for someone not in the SNAP household. If someone in a SNAP household is being accused of an IPV, they will receive a notice explaining that, and it will include the date for the disqualification hearing. DSS often includes a waiver form on this notice, and the waiver says you can agree to waive the disqualification hearing and accept the consequences. It's important to know you do not have to sign that waiver form. The hearing officer for the local disqualification hearing, which is usually the first level, is someone at DSS who has not been previously involved in the case. The hearing officer will provide the SNAP household with a copy of their decision. It should come typically by certified mail, and you then have 15 calendar days from the date of the decision to appeal. So it's a very short turnaround time. And after an appeal, the household, so you get that decision and you decide to appeal, the household could then have a state level disqualification hearing with the hearing officer from North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. The consequences for an IPV are pretty substantial. The first IPV is a 12-month disqualification. The second one is 24 months. And a third IPV is permanent SNAP disqualification. And then there's specific to misrepresenting your residence or identity to receive multiple benefits, corresponds to a 10-year disqualification. In addition to that, all of the adult members of a SNAP household can be found jointly responsible to pay back the SNAP benefits that the household should not have received, but for the IPV. So if you're involved in a hearing process as a SNAP household, either meaning a household receiving benefits or one that is applying for benefits and was denied, the household or their representative can review the case file and the records that DSS plans to use at the hearing. The household can represent themselves. They could retain a lawyer, or they could have someone else be a spokesperson to essentially represent them during the hearing. The household has a right to bring witnesses who can testify in the hearing about any of the relevant issues. And they can submit evidence such as records, receipts, etc., that they think will help explain the case. The household has the right to question or challenge the testimony and or evidence presented by DSS. And they may request a postponement of up to 30 days if they need more time to prepare for the hearing or to seek a lawyer. With that, we've gotten to the end of the presentation, and I will open it up for questions. Just a reminder to what Jennifer said in the beginning of the presentation. This is a public forum, and legal aid cannot provide direct legal advice during this presentation. So please keep questions general and be mindful of sharing any personal information as part of your question if you want to ask one.
Thank you, Kara. And as Kara said, please type your questions into Facebook or in the question and answer in Zoom. If anyone has a hand raised, please note you can't unmute yourself in this type of webinar. So you will have to type your question into the chat boxes if you do have a question. Right now, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. So I'm just going to kind of leave this alone for a few minutes, and we'll wait a minute and see if anybody has anything before we close out. As a reminder for anybody joining us online right now on Facebook or Zoom, we've reached the end of the presentation. We're in a question and answer session. I'm not seeing any questions right now. I'll wait another 30 seconds. If there are no questions, we'll close out this webinar. All right, Kara, thank you so much for your presentation. Your presentation was so thorough. No one has any questions for you. So we appreciate you being here and being able to provide this information for the public. I'm going to go ahead and close out the presentation.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.